Haas joined the 2016 Formula 1 grid as the 11th team and the first new team since the three minnows of 2010. They would enter their very first Formula 1 car, the VF16, a car that was built on behalf of the team by Italian manufacturer Dallara, and also using as many parts as possible from Ferrari, including the engine. The VF16 would be driven by Esteban Gutierrez, returning to Formula 1 after a year away, and Romain Grosjean, poached away from Lotus, who were now Renault. The team would score points on their competitive debut in the Australian Grand Prix, with Grosjean finishing P6, much to his elation over the radio. He would go one better at the following round in Bahrain with P5, the team's single best result of the entire season. Grosjean would then score again 2 rounds later with P8 in Russia, before points finishes for the team dried up. The team would only score twice more for the rest of the season, with Grosjean picking up a P7 at the Austrian Grand Prix and P10 at the team's home race in the United States. Gutierrez, on the other hand, would not score at all, meaning that Grosjean would score all 29 of Haas's points that year, enough to secure the American outfit 8th place in the Constructors' Championship, a respectable result for their debut season. It wouldn't be all smooth sailing, of course. The team would suffer 2 double retirements at the Malaysian and Brazilian Grand Prix, but it was still a respectable start to their Formula 1 adventure, giving them something that they could build on. But as the first American Formula 1 team since the unrelated Beatrice Haas team some 30 years before, the team would be under a lot of scrutiny, just like my laps in this video. Romain Grosjean would be retained by Haas F1 team for 2017, whilst his Mexican teammate Esteban Gutierrez would be dropped in favour of Dane Kevin Magnussen. Together, they would drive the Battleship Grey VF17 in the 2017 Formula 1 World Championship. The season would not start well for Haas, as they would suffer a double retirement at the season and opening round in Australia. But after that, points became a somewhat frequent occurrence, providing the team with a solid, if unremarkable, season. They didn't really turn any heads, but they weren't exactly drawing too much ire either. Grosjean would score more frequently than his Danish teammate, picking up the team's single best result of 6th place at the Austrian Grand Prix, whilst Magnussen would score a best of 7th at the preceding Azerbaijan Grand Prix, helping the team on their way to 47 points and 8th place in the Constructors once again. It was another respectable result for the team, but it could have been better. They were just 10 points away from finishing 6th in the Constructors, if only they had managed to finish in the points a couple more times. Haas would retain their driver lineup of Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen into the 2018 season to drive the VF18, a car that, as always, was designed to use as many Ferrari components as possible, something that was somewhat controversial as it looked surprisingly similar to the previous year's Ferrari SF70. Haas's season appeared to get off to a decent start, with the Haas Giro running in 4th and 5th in the season opening round in Australia. But things went terribly wrong when both cars retired due to the same issue, a cross-threaded wheel nut at the pit stops, leading to the two cars to retire within 2 laps of each other. In the immortal words of then team principal Gunther Steiner,
"Gene, we finished 4th and 5th here. You fucking look like rock stars, huh? And now we're a fucking bunch of wanker."
the team would have a mixed run of form after this. Magnussen would score the team's first points of the season with a 5th place in Bahrain, and he would score semi-consistently for the rest of the season, whilst Grosjean would fail to score until the Austrian Grand Prix, 8 rounds later, when he scored P4, the team's best result of not just their season, but their entire history, something they wouldn't match for another 7 years. With Magnussen bringing up the rear in 5th place, this would properly begin Haas's charge for 4th place in the Constructors' Championship, fighting against Renault. Ultimately, however, their bid for 4th would fail, as the team would earn 2 disqualifications, one at the Italian Grand Prix for Grosjean, and a second at the United States Grand Prix for Magnussen. With Renault scoring strongly on both occasions, this all but sealed the deal for Haas's bid for 4th, and they would finish the season in 5th place, with 93 points to their name. It is to date the most successful season that Haas has managed. At the time of recording of this video, Haas have yet to equal or beat the points they scored in that season. It was all downhill from here. The Haas VF19, yet again driven by Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen, would take on a rather familiar colour scheme for the 2019 Formula 1 season, the black and gold reminiscent of the John Player Special Lotus colours of the 70s and 80s. However, tobacco sponsorship had not been miraculously allowed back in the sport just for Haas. These were the colours of so-called energy drink manufacturer Rich Energy, or as they are known by their proper title, Total Bollocks. The VF19 had reasonably good one-lap pace, allowing the car to qualify as high as 5th in the Austrian Grand Prix. This was due to the car's ability to heat up its tyres very quickly, getting them into the proper working window for a qualifying lap. Unfortunately, this would backfire on them in the races, as this ability to heat up the tyres quickly led them to overheating in the Grand Prix themselves. That 5th place start for Magnussen in Austria would become 19th by the checkered flag, with Grosjean finishing a measly 16th. Haas would struggle to rectify these tyre heating issues for the entire season, often running different specifications on each car each weekend, with one car running launch specification kit and the other running whatever upgrades they could use to try and mitigate the issues. Ultimately, none of their efforts would really work, and the team's pace suffered greatly as a result. The team went from finishing in 5th place in the Constructors in 2018 to finishing only 9th, scoring just 28 points, one less than they achieved in their debut season. The best weekend of Haas's season would come at the German Grand Prix, where the two cars would finish in 7th and 8th, courtesy of a couple of 30-second penalties for the Alfa Romeo Saubers. Points would otherwise be very hard to come by, with the team's best single result being a 6th place finish at the Australian Grand Prix, the season opening round. It also didn't help when the two drivers came together at the British Grand Prix, resulting in a double retirement. And yet another immortal Steinerism.
He does not fox smash my door.
It was quite the fall from grace for the American team, and with the whole Rich Energy debacle going on the sidelines, the team was quickly turning into a bit of a laughingstock, and things were only going to get worse. Once again driven by Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen, the Haas VF20 was just an evolution of the previous year's VF19, as 2020 was planned to be the final year of the 2017 aero regulations. Due to this shared heritage, the VF20 shared the same inconsistency issues as the VF19, but this time it wasn't even particularly quick in qualifying. Due to Haas running Ferrari power units, they too were struck by the same sanctions that Ferrari was hit by, due to the Ferrari engines of the previous season being less than legal. So now the car didn't just have a problem with overheating its tyres, it was underpowered as well. And being that it was already based off of a flawed platform, it suffered even more. The team went from scoring every 5 rounds or so in 2019 to basically not scoring at all in 2020, as the team would pick up just 3 points across the 17-race season, with Magnussen picking up 10th place in Hungary and Grosjean 9th at the Eiffel Grand Prix in Germany. These 3 points were only enough for the team to finish 9th place in the Constructors' Championship for the 2nd year running, ahead of only the pointless Williams team. The VF20's competitive career was far from remarkable, but there was one truly remarkable moment in its career. At the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix, just 3 corners into the race, the Haas of Romain Grosjean would collide with the AlphaTauri of Daniel Kvyat, resulting in Grosjean's car being speared into a crash barrier and causing the car to break in two and catch fire. Despite the flames and the awkward angle that the survival cell came to rest at, Grosjean managed to get out of the flaming wreckage with just minor burns to his hands and feet, a testament to just how far safety has come in Formula 1. Had this incident happened just 4 years beforehand, Grosjean would no longer be with us. And that's due to the halo. Had it not been there, Grosjean's head would have impacted the crash barrier, resulting in potentially fatal injuries. But due to its presence, it spread the barrier apart almost like a biblical tale and allowed for Grosjean's survival. The charred remains of Grosjean's car have been preserved as a testament to Formula 1's safety. It would be all change in the driver department for Haas in 2021. Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen would be given the boot, in favour of German rookie Mick Schumacher, son of the legendary 7-time champion Michael Schumacher, and Russian sex offender Nikita Mazepin. Sorry, I mean the son of a Russian oligarch. With Russian money funding the team, the car's livery would therefore reflect the branding of Uralkali, or Uralkali, which inexplicably, just for this one season, became the colours of the Russian flag, which was rather strange because due to a doping scandal in another sport, the Russian flag was not permitted to be shown. It was, suffice to say, rather embarrassing for an American racing car to be decked out in the Russian flag. What was equally embarrassing was the performance of the Haas VF21, as it was yet another evolution of the flawed VF19, owing to the fact that the 2021 regulations were hastily reorganised to force the teams to reuse their 2020 chassis, which meant that the VF21 was essentially just the VF20, which was essentially just the VF19, which was very badly flawed. Haas had already written off 2020, but now they were having to write off 2021 as well, and it really showed. The car received one minor update, and after that, it received nothing else. And it showed. The car was the slowest of the entire season, with the best result it could manage being a single 12th place at the Hungarian Grand Prix at the hands of Schumacher. Before this, they had been fighting Williams for 9th place in the Constructors' Championship again, and briefly held on to the spot after finishing 13th and 14th at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. But then Williams finished 12th at the French Grand Prix, and then 11th at the Austrian Grand Prix. And then they actually scored a lot of points, which was something that the Haas was simply incapable of, solidifying Haas in 10th and last place in the Constructors' Championship with 0 points, which is to date their worst performance in Formula 1. The team would end the season with a rather large repair bill, courtesy of Mazepin, living up to his nickname, Mazaspin. He earned this nickname due to his inability to actually drive properly. The Haas VF22 was the culmination of 2 years of work by the team to create an actually competitive car. It was originally planned that the car would be driven by Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin, just as it was in 2021. But during the first pre-season test in Barcelona, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the Haas team, wanting to distance themselves from any links with Russia, ejected Mazepin and the sponsorship of his father's company, Uralkali. In his place, they re-signed previous Haas driver Kevin Magnussen, who immediately jumped back into the seat and drove as if he never left, giving the car points on debut with an astonishing 5th place in Bahrain. An excellent result. The season began relatively well for Haas, with Magnussen picking up 15 points in the first 4 rounds. But there were also some low points. The inexperienced Mick Schumacher would end up crashing heavily during qualifying for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and then 5 rounds later he would crash heavily in the race, causing his car to be split in 2. These heavy crashes and the subsequent repair bills contributed to Schumacher being dropped for the end of the season. The pace of the car also dropped off after those first 4 rounds, with points becoming much harder to come by as the season went on. A mid-season upgrade allowed the car to have a reasonably good pair of weekends in Great Britain and Austria, with both cars scoring points. But after Austria, the car's pace dropped off once again, and points would only be scored on 2 more occasions, with Magnussen scoring a 9th place at the USA Grand Prix and an 8th place in the Sao Paulo Grand Prix Sprint, A race remembered for the fact that he scored not just his, but the team's first ever pole position, albeit under the tricky circumstances of a red-flagged wet session. Despite the strong start to the season, Haas wound up fighting once again in the lower echelons of the Constructors' Championship, narrowly beating AlphaTauri to 8th place in the Constructors' Championship with 37 points to their name. It was certainly a welcome improvement over the last 2 seasons, but things still had to improve for the team. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the case just yet. For 2023, Haas would replace one German with another, the inexperienced Mick Schumacher being replaced with the highly experienced Nico Hülkenberg. He would be partnered with Kevin Magnussen, a relationship that many expected to go quite poorly owing to past misgivings in previous seasons. Suck my balls, mate. The team would take on a new title sponsorship in the form of MoneyGram, and their livery would be quite different, taking on a majority black livery for the first time since 2019. This should have been telegraphing something to all of us, because with a largely black livery, that probably meant the team was struggling with weight issues, and it really showed. The performance of the Haas VF23 was poor. The car could only finish in the points on 5 separate occasions, with the best finish being a 6th place in the Austrian Grand Prix sprint. Haas could only manage to score a grand total of 12 points across the 22 race season. 12 points that would end up only being enough for 10th place and last in the Constructors' Championship, only 2 years after they were 10th and last for the first time. Also setting a record for the most points scored by the last place constructor in the process, a record that has since been usurped by Alpine. It was a dismal season for the team, with several upgrades for the car failing to work as the simulations predicted. The problems of old had returned. The car had decent qualifying pace, but was terrible during the races due to its high tyre wear, caused by overheating. These were problems that Haas were facing time and again, and they had to rectify them fast. And to their credit, they did eventually iron out those issues. But it wouldn't be in 2023, but rather the following year, 2024. 2023 was already a lost season for the team, even losing 9th place to Alfa Romeo Sauber in the last third of the season by just 4 points, after the latter team had an excellent weekend in Qatar. 2024 needed to be better. "2024 saw a major team shake-up going into the season. the team's popular team principal Gunther Steiner would be sacked, as it was felt that much of the team's problems stemmed from him, and he would be replaced by Ayao Komatsu. Komatsu downplayed the VF24's chances in 2024, believing that the team would be at a significant disadvantage going into the year. But these misgivings proved unfounded, as the car would turn out to be the most competitive they'd had for several years. The team's constant struggles with tyre overheating issues were finally being ironed out, and although the car wasn't the most competitive over the season, it was competitive enough to start fighting for higher places in the championship table, being as high as 6th right up until the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Unfortunately for Haas, their Sao Paulo Grand Prix weekend would be marred by a disqualification for Nico Hülkenberg after he received assistance from marshals after his car got beached. And then of course Alpine came along and got a pair of podiums that they didn't really deserve, and pushed Haas down to 7th place in the Constructors, where they remained until the end of the season, finishing with 58 points to their name. Despite this late season setback, it was nonetheless a reasonably successful season for the team, and a much needed improvement after finishing 10th twice in 3 years. But whilst it was a fairly anonymous season for the team, it wasn't without its issues. Kevin Magnussen would pick up 12 penalty points across the season, earning himself a race ban for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. He would be deputised by star rookie driver Oliver Behrman, who had impressed for deputising for another team earlier in the season, and he would even score a point in Azerbaijan. He deputised for Magnussen again in Sao Paulo after Magnussen was taken ill, but he failed to replicate his point-scoring form. But the team's most nail-biting moment of the year didn't come on the track, when Dutch police and bailiffs arrived in the paddock to evaluate Haas's assets for potential seizure to pay off the team's former title sponsors, Uralkali. The situation would eventually be resolved after Haas repaid Uralkali $9 million, and they were allowed to continue on their way to Italy a few days late, and of course with their pockets feeling a bit lighter. But hey, at least there was still a Haas team left to compete. ...2025 saw Haas taking part with a brand new driver lineup for the first time since 2021. Kevin Magnussen would be replaced by Oliver Behrman, and Nico Hülkenberg, who would depart for Sauber, was replaced by Esteban Ocon. Not only that, there was a new technical partnership from Toyota Gazoo Racing, an unprecedented return from one of the largest car manufacturers in the world, who had left Formula 1 several years earlier after their first foray into the sport yielded no fruitful results. Haas's steed for the 25 season was, of course, the VF25. And the season would not start particularly well. After finishing 2024 so strongly, they started the season qualifying poorly in Australia and then not scoring any points. But these issues would fade at the very next race in China, where they would score a double points finish. The Haas duo would go on to score 4 more double points finishes across the season, including an incredible 16-point haul at the Mexico City Grand Prix, where Behrman finished a joint best result for Haas of 4th place, and it even looked like he was in genuine podium contention. This was an excellent result from the young Brit, who'd suffered through a 10-race pointless streak in the middle of the season. Ocon too would suffer from a streak of poor performance, scoring just 1 point between the British and United States Grand Prix. Behrman would ultimately outscore his more experienced teammate by 3 points across the season. A brilliant result for the rookie, ultimately meaning that he contributed more than half of the team's points that season. In what proved to be a competitive final year for the ground effect era, Haas would score 79 points across the 24 rounds, enough to finish 8th place in the Constructors' Championship, and the team will be hoping to improve upon that result going into 2026. They retain their driver lineup of Behrman and Ocon going into the new era of Formula 1. And with their relationship with Toyota Gazoo Racing only getting stronger, it's looking like the American outfit could one day become the works factory outfit for Toyota instead. But will Gene Haas be willing to sell the team? Who knows? Until that day comes, Haas will be known as TGR Haas F1 Team for 2026 at the least. Who knows where their future lies?